Hi. So far, we have learned about the zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting, we learned about the meaning of the zero-based budgeting, the advantages, disadvantages, how is it different from the traditional way of doing things, what are the steps in doing it, how we transition from the traditional budgeting to the zero-based budgeting, and some steps. Right. So now let's talk about some practical measures, how we apply the zero-based budgeting and how I have applied in my hotel as a zero-based budgeting. So the first thing that we have to do when we are applying the zero-based budgeting is to look at the mindset. Now, if you ask me that is there any template or is there any format in Excel or in somewhere else that we can use it for applying the zero-based budgeting? I would say there is no format like that because zero-based budgeting is more as a concept, as a mindset rather than a template. So the first thing that we have to do is to change the mindset of the peoples who are actually involved in the budgeting process, right? So the most important thing we have to do is we have to tell our management or the senior managers to really think and get into the details of what are the activities that our organization is really doing as of now and if they are relevant in our near future. So when we want to evaluate that what kind of activity are going to be effective next year and what is going to be useful for next year, we need to have a basis of criteria. We need to have a criteria in our mind that we want to really assess, right? So means that there has to be a strategic discussion first at the top level to say where is the company going, where we want to achieve, what is our next year strategy, what are our focus areas. Once you know that, you need to cascade that down to the organization level in the mid management and into the supervisory levels to see and seek what are the activities that we are doing now which are useful and will continue to be do next year. What are the activities that we think are not going to be useful and we should stop doing it? What are the new activities that we would need to do at the time of to really achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves? So the goals could be in the next 1 year, could be in the next 3 years. So we might have to invest into the resources, new resources. We might have to discontinue some of the processes. We might have to continue some of the processes. So the supervisory level, the mid management level, the senior management level have to really think forward and prepare those activities. Once you have done that, the next process, the next step of all that is should be consolidate, summarize, comprise that into the one bunch so that activities of one department are not contradicting with one with another one, and we are not doing duplicate things. Then we may have to reorganize our organization and see uh, um, what kind of resources do we need in total, and do we need to have new departments, do we need to scrap off the departments? There's usually a reorganization which is needed, right, for the effective or for the effective planning and execution processes. So it's not only about the financial numbers, it's more of a strategic planning and the reorganization of the entire organization itself. After you have done this step of consolidating the activities which are required, which needs to be dropped down, which needs to be added new ones, then the second thing comes as the scenario planning. Now, to do something things, there are multiple options, right? So if you want to invest into if you want to really, let's say you want to buy a machine. So you have a different choices. You can lease the machine, you can buy the machine, you can contract out the services to say, okay, we want to do soft machine as a service, right? So now you have, and even with that one, purchasing of machine could be a scenario, because in management, when we are making decisions, we are planning out the scenarios that, okay, in scenario A we are going to do this, scenario B we are going to do this, scenario 3 we are going to do this. Within those scenarios there could be multiple scenarios. So how you are going to assess the financial implication of those multiple scenarios? So my strategy is, normally we define the root scenario, right? So scenario number 1, scenario number 2, scenario number 3, or scenario number 4. we do the planning separate for into this. So we don't really want to combine the Excel files or combine the budgeting files into one, and where from one file we can see all the scenarios. That's the later part. First is we set up the financial models for creating the budgeting and creating the P&L for each scenario separately. Within those scenarios, there may be multiple options that we might have to generate, right? So for that, in you can use the scenario managing in Excel. If you're using Excel, if you're using a software, that software might have option for scenario planning. Otherwise, you may have to do it in Excel. So you can use the scenario manager in Excel in the data what if analysis. We have a separate Excel class if you really want to learn about the financial modeling, to learn about how to do the financial modeling for various decision making, where I teach about the scenario planning as well. So you could use that. In Excel, we can create scenarios, multiple scenarios in our business, in our from our root scenario. So we are not saying that we will create a scenario planning in Excel for the main root scenarios. Root scenarios means they are completely different. You cannot compare them. The variables are completely different, right? So you have to create them separate budgets. Within each scenario, if there are multiple decision making points, we are evaluating the choices between the two different decisions. Then we can use the scenario planning, or we could create like sub models, sub financial models for each decision making. And then we say, okay, what is the impact of this decision based on certain variables? And then we select those decisions and move forward, apply that into the root scenario. So this way, the models are going to be much cleaner and it's easy to read. Otherwise, compared to if you try to put everything into one congested one where you have multiple scenarios, multiple columns, is messy, right? So the next process was to evaluate all the scenarios, finalize for each scenario what are the decision making points, where how we are going to make the decision, how we are going to implement based on the financial models that we have created, sub financial models we have created. And then you will combine the results, and then you will evaluate, okay, there's no choice of scenario. So these scenarios are actually not to be chosen from. These scenarios are where how you can pivot. So the next step is how we are going to pivot from one scenario to second scenario in case we need to do, right? So this in times of uncertainty, when we don't know how the future is going to be, we are always making scenarios. Zero-based budgeting is one of the case where we don't know the future. That's why we normally do the zero-based budgeting for different scenarios. So we need to find the pivotal moments and pivotal ways how we transition from one scenario to another scenario. There will always be that we will be in one scenario, we are working towards it. Suddenly things change. We are going towards the next scenario. So we need to know how we are going to pivot from one scenario to the other scenario. So, and what are the costs involved in that cost, in that case, because the ultimate objective is either to reduce the cash burn or to make profit or to improve the ROI, reduce the losses, and make the operational efficiencies. Then once you have identified the pivotal points, how we are going to pivot from one scenario to another scenario, then the next point is to communicate, right? So you need to communicate the zero-based budget in terms of KPIs. So you need to establish the KPIs for each and every step, each and every decision point that you have thought of, so that you can start to prepare for discontinuation of activities and initiate the new activities which are required by the zero-based budgeting. So those activities are very important in planning. So that's because without the communication, the zero-based budgeting is not going to be successful. So we need to really work on the communication aspect of the zero-based budgeting. Once these activities are communicated, then and the plan is now going to start executing, we need to monitor the results. So the next step of the zero-based budgeting would be to monitor what we have actually budgeted, what are the KPIs that we wanted to measure, so that we know whether we are going to be able to reach we are going to remain in the scenario, or we are going to be we need to be pivoting. So for that purpose, we need to reforecast all the time, right? Because every month, every 2 months, we need to reforecast for the next consecutive 3 months, 6 months down the line, so that we know whether we are falling in scenario one, scenario two, scenario three, or do we need to change the scenarios, right? So we need to identify that and compare our results plus the reforecasting against the zero-based budget that we have prepared to know whether we are within our budget or we need to pivot to the next scenario. So that's really the context of the zero-based budgeting. Uh, there is no template. So if you have any questions, feel free to do post that in the chat box or in the comments, and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you very much for attending my course, and a review of the course would be really appreciated so that I know if my teaching has been helpful to you. Thank you.